How's it going, everybody? It's the Dual Threat Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob.
I'm Michael.
This is your daily news source for all things sports. Before we get into the video, we're one subscriber away from 100. So it would really help us out if you would go smash that like button and hit the notification bell too. It notify you whenever we post a video every day, every weekday. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter at Dual Threat. We post a lot of stuff on Twitter. And if you can't watch our videos, listen to us on Spotify if you're in the car driving and just want to listen to some sports talk. Today, we're going to be getting into a little bit of a wild card NFL video. We're going to be talking about the Baltimore Ravens and why we think they are pretty significantly overrated.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand it off to Michael to start us off, and we're going to get right into it.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Ravens' record, they're 6-3, sitting in second in the AFC North behind the undefeated Steelers. I say second, they're tied with the Browns, but they're ahead of them when it comes to tiebreakers. And then the Bengals are at the bottom, 2-6. If you look at their record, a 6-3 team, that's pretty impressive. But Jacob and I have both come to the understanding that the record doesn't tell the whole story. And whether it's between the poor performance of the actual players on the team or the poor performance of the teams that they've played in the past, we don't think that the Ravens' record actually reflects how bad of a team they are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they're bottom tier, but
No.
I'm not saying they're one of the top tier teams that you would put in the 6-3 column. And so one thing for me is that I don't think they've really played that much competition, and when they have, they haven't done well. Just to go over their entire schedule, they beat the Browns, they beat the Texans, they lost to the Chiefs, they beat the Washington football team, they beat the Bengals, they beat the Eagles, they lost to the Steelers, they beat the Colts, and they lost to New England. And so for me, the only impressive win out of all of those is really beating the Colts. And if you look at the Colts schedule, the Colts are also 6-3. I think another overrated team. They beat the Vikings, the Jets, the Bears, the Bengals, the Lions, and the Titans. And so out of all those teams, to me, the Titans are really the only really good contender. And so, I don't know, I'll let you take over and kind of express some of your thoughts on it. But to me, their schedule just isn't a very strong schedule. And when they played Kansas City and the Steelers, who are easily the two best teams that they've played, they've lost. And so,
Yeah, I agree. I think you look at the Ravens this year, and coming in, everybody was expecting them to be a top team in the AFC, a top team in the NFL. And they've proven that they're pretty good. They're okay. Their record is significantly above average at 6-3, like you were saying. But I think a big thing is coming from the quarterback position. And Lamar Jackson winning the MVP last year, everybody expected him to come out and do more of the same. And it feels like their weapons are the exact same, but they got worse. And they got worse statistically, I should say. And I think that a lot of that comes from, over the summer, I was talking to one of our friends, and I said, I think Lamar Jackson's going to have a down year. Not necessarily be terrible, but not MVP, not like a Sam Darnold season, but not follow up his MVP with another great year. Mm-hmm. Because I was saying I compared him to Johnny Manziel in the fact of it feels like Johnny Manziel, his first year at Texas A&M, obviously was insane, won the Heisman, was nuts. Comes back the next year, and it was A&M's first year in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Nobody at the time, it felt like, in the SEC was as explosive or dynamic of a player as Johnny Manziel, and it caught everybody by surprise. And that's why they came out and won the Heisman. And I think Lamar Jackson was a very similar situation. Came out, nothing like they had seen for 15 years since Michael Vick. Right, nobody knew how to stop him. And in the last year, since the end of last season coming into this year, it feels like teams are game planning more to containing Lamar Jackson and making him throw the ball, because he's not a great passer, and that was a concern everybody had in drafting him. His deep ball is not good. Mm-hmm. His completion percentage is 64, which isn't horrible. That's pretty decent. He's only averaging 250 254 pass yards per game, and he has 14 touchdowns, which is good, not great, through 10 games in the season, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing compared to the leaders in the NFL. And like Manziel in his sophomore year, because of redshirt freshman year, but like Manziel in his sophomore year, he started getting figured out by these SEC defenses, and it seems like the AFC has really realized that if you put a big focus on him running, he can't beat you in the air like he should be able to, like Vic could, like Russell Wilson can. They don't live or die by the ground game, and that seems like what Lamar Jackson's been doing this season.
Well, no, I definitely agree. And you look at his numbers, he has 17 total touchdowns. You said 14 passing. So on the ground, definitely a lot less of an impact than he was last year. And he has 8 total turnovers. I think he has 5 interceptions and maybe 3 fumbles, I want to say. That's tied 9th for most total turnovers in the league by any player. And you look at games like arguably the biggest game of the year so far that they've had against the Steelers. They lost by 4, and Lamar Jackson had 4 turnovers that game. And that's a divisional game against an undefeated team. You need to win those games. You need to try and get a sweep on the Steelers if you have any chance of making the playoffs, especially because of how well that they're doing.
Right.
And you could argue that Lamar lost that game for him, especially because when it comes to points per game, the Ravens have a #1 defense in points per game. So I think it's their offense that they're having troubles with, obviously, because their defense is doing the right stuff, and their lack of offense, I think, they're 22nd in the league in yards per game and 12th in the league in points per game. And so I think that their offense is severely overrated because you look at the fact that they have the reigning MVP, and you have athletes like Hollywood Brown, Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, although Mark Ingram has been on and off the field. And it's easy to look at those guys, and especially Mark Andrews, a great tight end. You look at those guys, it's easy to say this is a great offense. Well, Lamar is their leading rusher with 524 yards. That's 13th in the league, and he's their leading rusher. Gus Edwards is their next highest rusher, who's 33rd in the league. Hollywood Brown leads the team in receiving yards. He's 45th in the league. That includes any position receiving. So like even Alvin Kamara is above him.
Right. Yeah.
But and then Mark Andrews leads the team in receiving touchdowns with 5, and he's 18th. So you're not looking at in passing. Lamar is 25th in the league and 17th in the league in touchdowns when it comes to passing yards and touchdowns. And so you don't have a single top 10 player when it comes to a statistical standpoint on that team on offense. And it shows against teams like when you're barely beating teams like the Eagles, and like that just ends up showing they just lost to New England 23-17 because they just failed to. 23 points is not a lot of points to beat,
Right.
But no, to me, I think everyone on that offense is just really overrated, and because they've been good in the past, and it's just not turning out well for them because, they just can't put up the numbers that other offenses can, and that's how they're gonna end up losing more games later in the season, I feel like.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you look at the Ravens this year offensively. Take it from a yards per game standpoint. They are like 20th in the NFL in yards per game.
And on offense?
On offense.
Yeah, they're 22nd.
22nd, thank you.
Yeah.
And you look at last year, they were second.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big turnaround.
They're off, everything you just said. Their offense can't get going. Their defense is good, but comparing to last year, they're giving up more yards per game, similar points per game.
They're
I believe.
first in the league in points per
Right,
game, which
right.
is impressive. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, no, and it seems like they're excelling this year on the defensive side of the ball in pass yards. In their pass protection defense, because they're like 8th in the league in pass defense, which is very solid. And when it comes to rushing, they're like 12th or 13th. And so like they're an upper half defense, but really like it's not that #2 defensive or yards per game defense like it was last year. And yeah, they're giving up not that many points, but I mean, it's to the Eagles. They gave up 28 points to the Eagles.
I know.
And yeah, I think their defense is people are expecting their defense to be how it was last year, when in reality, missing Earl Thomas and just the guys not playing as well as they should be, their defense is worse than it seems, and people are making it out to be.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I get that, and like, so that's why it's also hard to compare numbers from this year and last year, especially because people are going to say a win's a win.
Right.
And I think that the Ravens will get into the playoffs as a wild card because, sure. I mean, they're already 6-3.
Right.
They beat the Browns already. I think they will beat the Browns again. I think the Browns are an overrated team, also sitting at 6-3 because two of their wins are against the Bengals, who are 2-6. One of their wins is against the Texans, who are 2-7. The Browns have beat the Colts, who are 6-3, so that's impressive. And then their other two wins, Washington and Dallas. So you're looking at this Browns team who is also overrated to me, although I would say people would argue that they're not. People would say that they're not as good as their record shows. So I'm just saying overrated when it comes to record.
Yeah.
But so you have Cleveland. They play them once more this season. Like I said, Cleveland is really overrated, but I think the Ravens are going to beat them. Their hardest two games of the season are Tennessee and Pittsburgh. I think they lose both of those games. But then other than that, they have a very easy schedule. Their last 5 games, you have Dallas. You have Dallas at home. You go to Cleveland, Jacksonville and New York at home, and then you go to Cincinnati. And so I think that they're going to get in as a wild card because of that absolutely easy schedule.
Right.
But like I was saying, anytime they faced any sort of competition so far, they've lost. And like Kansas City, you lose by 2 touchdowns, and the Steelers, you lose by 4. And so I just think that they're really overrated because they have this is one of the easy, other than Kansas City and the Steelers twice, this is one of the easiest schedules I've seen in football this year.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
No, it's not. And so I don't know. I think they're going to get far, but in the playoffs, they're not going to do anything because then they're going to be facing those teams like the Chiefs and the Steelers and the Titans, all in the AFC.
Right.
And it's not going to go well for them because it hasn't in the past when they've played good teams. Mm-hmm. And so.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at it, like you were saying, their schedule has been fairly easy. Last year they were 7-2 through 10 games.
Yeah.
Through week 10, and this year they're 6-3. Not much difference. The big difference was Lamar Jackson last year MVP season had 36 touchdowns.
Yeah.
This year passing. This year he has 14, and there's 6 games left. So
he's not going to get to 36.
Even if he doubled it, he would still be 8 touchdowns short of 36 from last year. And I think that's a big part is can't find the end zone. And everybody knows him getting drafted, nobody was expecting he's going to throw 5,000 yards a year.
No.
But what really helped him last year be that kind of elite quarterback in the passing game is he only had 3,100 yards, but he had 36 touchdowns. And it looks like he's not even going to be close to that this year. His touchdown percentage is 5.7%. Last year it was 9%.
Yeah.
Which is a big differential. And so you look at just how the rest of their season is shaping up, and maybe he gets a couple big games against like Dallas and Jacksonville and New York. But I mean, you look at it overall, and it doesn't seem like it seems like he should be playing better in a lot of these games early on that he hasn't been. And like against Pittsburgh, even like you mentioned earlier, they got up early and then he kind of threw the game away at the end.
Yeah.
And stuff like that you just can't have happen when you're talked about as being the number one or one of the top quarterbacks in the league, especially coming off of your MVP season.
No, I definitely agree. And like another thing you're mentioning is his disability to find the end zone. I just think it's also a team's disability of using their stars because you have Hollywood Brown, obviously the best receiver on that team. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say best red zone target. I'd probably give that to Mark Andrews.
Right.
But still, I mean, he has 55 targets and that's 45th in the league. And I mean, there are 32 teams. So there are only 32 number one receivers on a team, and he is that number one receiver by far, I feel like. But you have guys like Calvin Ridley and Julio, and like a bunch of receivers on the same team, Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, like getting more targets individually than the number one receiver is getting at all. And so like I think that they're just having trouble moving the ball. They're obviously having trouble choosing who to have in their primary backfield. And it's just showing because it's just a very inconsistent offense. And I don't think Lamar is just able to work with that because Marquise Brown went off last year.
Right.
And now he's just not. And he's shown his frustration on Twitter. And he's been really mad about them not using him as much. So it's not something he's doing wrong. It's just I feel like the offensive scheme isn't there.
Yep.
And because their defense is obviously doing what's right. But that's why I think that's kind of my overall thing why the Ravens are severely overrated is the talent they've played and their offense is not up to the stature of other offenses that are at the 6-3 level.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, you look at last year compared to this year. Lamar Jackson averaged 58 rush yards per game last year. I'm sorry. He averages 58 this year. He averaged almost 80 last year.
Yeah.
And so that is a huge gap. And I think a lot of it boils down to what I was talking about when I said that he is kind of getting figured out, I think, personally. And because, I mean, you look at his passing is not that much different on a per game basis.
Yeah.
He's not finding the end zone. But in terms of passing yards, he's doing what he did last year. He did the same thing pretty much, it felt like. But when it comes to his rushing, and that's why he was able to excel, because when teams didn't know how to guard him and didn't know what he could just take off and beat you on the ground at any moment, then that's when you mix in play action and pass the ball, because you have tight ends who are wide open when you do a fake triple option and then you throw out a little 15-yard dump pass over the middle to the tight end.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know, it's his rushing ability. It seems like he got figured out, and that's a big part of why I think he hasn't been able to been as effective in the pass game and the run game, because they kind of lean off of each other. I mean, we talk about so much a team like, I don't know, somebody say, for example, like the Texans, and they're having a bad year, but I think a lot of that comes from they can't run the football. And when you can't run the football, you can't throw the football as well. And it just kind of leans on each other, and that's a big part of why Lamar Jackson. I mean, look at these last 3 weeks in Seattle. Russell Wilson's been good, but Chris Carson's been out. Carlos Hyde's been out.
Yeah.
They can't mix up their strategy, and when all you're doing is passing, unless you have Patrick Mahomes, you can't beat a team that knows you have to pass every time.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you mentioned the Texans. I know this isn't a Texans video, but to me, they have one of the hardest schedules in football.
Right.
But still, yes, they are having trouble running the ball, and there are a lot of similarities between the Ravens and the Texans when it comes to that. But other than that, that's kind of all I have to say. Do you want to add anything else? Or?
Yeah, and one final thing I think about just Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in general is, they've been a good team recently. They got a first-round bye last year. But when you look at how they've performed in the playoffs, last year, their one game, they lost to Tennessee 12-28, who Tennessee ended up being pretty decent. They beat the Patriots, but the year before, they lost 17-23 to the Chargers. They played okay, but Lamar Jackson had 3 turnovers in the game last year, and it just feels like he doesn't have that it factor of, yes, we get to the playoffs and we're the same team that we beat you in the regular season. It seems like he kind of gets to the playoffs and chokes. I really just don't think he's a winner in my eyes. I mean, you look at, he had 1 fumble that he lost this year, this past year. The year before, he lost 3 fumbles, or he fumbled 3 times.
Yeah.
Didn't lose all 3 of them, but still. And it seems like in those big games, there was too much pressure for him. And I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he gets better. And that is a fun team to watch. And I think that if he gets it figured out, that would be a great team to see and make a playoff run. But I just can't see it happening right now. And I personally think I think they may be top 5 in the AFC. But I mean, you look at Steelers are ahead of them, the Chiefs are ahead of them for sure, the Titans are ahead of them. The Colts might even be ahead of them. I mean, they beat the Colts heads up, so I guess you got to give it to the Ravens there. But it just feels like these last few weeks, ever since that Philly game, they haven't really looked
solid,
as good as you expect the Ravens to week in and week out. And so I guess we'll see how the rest of the season shapes up. Like I said, they were 7-2 at this point last year, so they could go on a run and win 5 in the next 7 games. And I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I think that's it for me. And so we will catch you tomorrow for our next video.